Thank you, Technic fanatics, for your views, for your subscriptions. Rated Exploited is now 500 strong. To commemorate this new flair of a milestone, here I am to focus on the hot takes of Bionicle. Opinionated, down to earth, focus on the more negative side of this most grand toy line. You are hereby initiated into Rated Exploited. From BZPower, we have a post by Fry. What pieces are the most difficult and annoying for you to take apart? His primary selection are the rock sheet headpiece. Here we have the advantage of a head and ball joint socket, but I do agree, these are a challenge in separating, but with the right tool, specifically the brick separator, that does make it easier. Though it is easy to associate the build here with a strong component setup. Reliable nonetheless. From BonkleChaser on Twitter, the X name of the now appointed X, 2005 may have been a mediocre year, but the Titans were great. This is a fact. I do get the impression 2005 was stretching out the theme of Metro Nui. 2004 was significantly different. This is even on TV tropes as the seasonal rot. There I do disagree. The story is strong. I love the sets, even the metaphor of web of shadows, not just referring to the Vizirek webs, but also the corruption of the Horica venom, especially Vakama. It has its strengths, but overall, it's a favorite year. His next quote, omitting the Ignition storyline in movie form was a mistake. I wholeheartedly agree. Though we are aware LEGO had a 3-year, 3-movie contract with Miramax, this is the primary reason 2006 did not have a film adaptation. In regard that 2006 was an entire facelift for Bionicle, in theme, presentation, even the advertising. And this was the identity it would carry in the next few years before its discontinuation of the G1 era. It is a loss, but all the more reason to speculate at what could have been. The Borak still hold up as extremely well-designed toys. Yes, I'd have a hard time finding a fellow fan who doesn't agree with this. Yes, they are palette swaps, with only a variation of Krana and shield design, but the Borak Khal stand higher in my own regard. Their color combination with the silver really took it to the extreme. The same dual tone build we see replicated in the Toa Nuva. But the fact the Borak have a dual stance design makes them a high regard within the entire line. The fandom mistreated Hero Factory and G2. Yes? I don't know enough about either lines to justify or even agree here, but it seems people instantly judge it, comparing it to the original Bionicle era, and therefore labeling as vastly inferior. But I see LEGO's direction. Hero Factory adopting the new construction system or constructible action figure gives it a different flair to Bionicle and more accessible to younger kids. Because remember, Bionicle was 6 and up, but even ones younger could get a feel for Hero Factory and adapting into this LEGO system. G2 is no different, but with gearboxes, for example, and even waist articulation, there's a lot more complexity when compared to Hero Factory. Mass packs should have been released each year. Among the fanbase, I'd find this to be unanimous. 2003 was the final year we actually had these. Following in 2004 into the retrospective era, we had Kanoka disc variations released in the same size boxes. Yes, I would love to have a full mask set for each of the Toa Metru. Perhaps even the new mask designs and paint variations of the Matoran introduced in the same year. A lot of potential, but I do feel the Metru masks, looking as retroactive machine-like, heavily underrated and definitely deserves a vast expansion. Shiro comments, "This is a generic LEGO set walking around in a skin suit pretending to be Bionicle. It has a limited amount of Technic parts, and it's more of a celebration of the Bionicle line. We do acknowledge the majority of Technic molds for the original era are no longer in use and were repurposed into additional LEGO building molds. I don't find it as a loss. It's nothing I hate. I mean, it's more of a love letter, to put it in the most basic of definition. But I have no hatred toward this build. I'm just glad LEGO hasn't forgotten the line that saved them in the beginning. Higher than a nitpick, below that of a hot take." Comment from Bushjeb. "The Hero Factory villain sets were actually kind of fire and deserve more love. Yes, by design base and the menacing builds presented in each of these foes, I can't agree more. If I see these designs and they were outside my knowledge of LEGO, I wouldn't feel any different. I adore the unique inspiration behind each of these, from industrial base creatures to more organic, even mythological base. It's ironic, but comparable to a line, say, G.I. Joe, where the Cobra villains have more inspiring designs than that of the heroes themselves." Jast outputs with Liwa is the best Toamata. Oh, I totally see where you're coming from. His depiction in the film alone really strikes a chord. Soothing voice, care for his fellow Matoran, and even the Rahid, the life that makes up the island of Matanui. I recall when it's discussed that Gali is the wisest, but I can't help but feel Liwa takes that mantle. His personality, his compatibility, the empathetic likability is just unmatched. That's why I'm grateful Matau has such a big contrast depicted in Legends of Metru Nui. Inhabitants of Likoro and Lemetru gives every fan, gives every inhabitant reason to strike up conversation, form a meaningful bond with the Toa of Air. The Sharnak upbrings with stone and earth should have been the same element. I see where he's coming from. In my mind, however, earth reacts differently than stone, such as being able to provide plant life, while stone itself is not living matter. Earth contains everything from minerals to organic cells, so it made sense to separate the two of them. But allow me to give my own argument. Should ice and water be the same element, just in a liquid form compared to the solidified form? Something to think about. The third comment by Sharnak, 2005 shouldn't have been a midquel in a prequel. Have the Toa Nuva returning to the Visorak conquered Metru Nui. That could totally work. The fact that Web of Shadows takes place between the divide of Liken's star and arriving on the beach of Matanui proves how difficult it is for someone new to watch them in order. I really have no problems with 2005. I see it as the end of the original era before Ignition takes off, as we were phasing out things such as the gearbox and shifting more into full articulation. But 2005 introduced a lot of new concepts, my favorite being the Bionicle playsets. But here's a hot take from my own personal opinion. The Visorak Gate is my absolute least favorite Bionicle set. Has so few Technic pieces, it's not even popular. I've never heard a fellow fan to even talk about it. Continuing on with the Sharnak, his penultimate comment, The time scale is way too long. In retrospect, it's better to have an abundance as opposed to a scarcity when you have an extensive lore such as Bionicle. When you look at things like Star Wars, there are so many open-ended storylines, it's practically infinite to expand on. And look at Yu-Gi-Oh! The CEO of Konami's US branch said they'd rather have an overly complex game than a minimal, basic game. I relate. I would rather have multiple points of lore to build off, to research, to discover. So I see the advantage here, but there is a gamut of quality throughout the original G1 era. Final comment, G2 had some of the best sets. Y'all are just me. Much truth to this. When I look at superior design in comparison to my least favorite throughout the line, G2 is never brought up. I love the designs here, super original and extensively detailed. Look at 2007. Sure, we have infamously brittle dual socket joints, but one cannot deny the original design amongst these characters. Theme of underwater, heck, the Baraki all seem to be based and inspired by various sea creatures, while the Tawamari have such incredible variety, you second guess yourself if they're even the same release. When I look at design and regard the highest in my favor, Mari Nui 2007 always is brought up. Unforgettable, incredible variety. Next commenter, Cheese House. The Red Star, being a character reviving station, was a stupid and pointless retcon, especially as nothing of substance came from it, and it devalues the death of characters like Lacan. I'm not sure it's a retcon. I am confident LEGO designed it post-2004, but it wouldn't work for Lacan. He sacrifices power for the Toa Metru. It might not make a difference, as it could work to revive him as a Turaga, and of course that same power was passed on to the Matoran, in the form of an inheritance between 3 generations. The Bionicle Wiki does list it as an enigma, so obviously it's not understood. What I do like about it is playing off the legend of star constellations predicting the future, using their position in the night sky, and then leading into the astrology, which is a prominent theme within Bionicle, especially in regards to Nuju in his original role on Metru Nui. Juke, Bionicle VTuber, responds with, Marinder, Velika as a great being, and the zombie-infested Red Star are the only good post-end of G1 lore additions. What they have in common is how impactful they are. For my interpretation, Matoro's sacrifice hits hard, but also the amount of lore, build-up, and promotion that went into the Paraka. Before, all the villains were focused on engineering from the shadows. In fact, I have a separate video entirely on the ingenious design of Bionicle villains. The link is in the description. But the Paraka are not only well-designed, but have great personalities and backstory, granting every reason to collect each Paraka to get invested in their role of this Bionicle universe. Continuing from Juke, Borak have the best gear function in the franchise. I'm not clear on your basis, but most of the original era, 2001 through 2005, focused on limb function by use of the gears, while the Borak tracked and retracked by the use of 2 sets of gears and function of the rubber band. It's especially prevalent when launching a Krana, in a way that's the first projectile in Bionicle, if I'm to interpret that correctly. Only the Barag share the identical function, projecting forward with snapping jaws. Alright, Juke, now we are on the identical wavelength. 2006 is the best year. I absolutely love 2006. It's a breath of fresh air from the previous 5 years, using new style, the new build system, nicknamed the Bionicle build, but also began phasing out palette swaps. We had the introduction of the Bionicle minifigures, and finally, my favorite character became a Toa. Well-deserved Jala. 2006 is in my high regard. There's probably more in this year I love within Bionicle than any other singular year. Strong point of lore and expansion, evolution, igniting the torch passed from the previous 2 generations. Metro Nui has the best movie by far. I admit, majority of fans hail Mask of Light as the dominant movie. However, this does not change the merit of Legends of Metro Nui. I love the basis. The setting is my absolute favorite amongst Bionicle, and I'm aware just how much the team put into creating Metro Nui. But I love seeing the challenge of Vakama being chosen as a Toa. The amount of doubt he has, wondering why he was chosen for such a monumental task. My favorite aspect has to be the score of Nathan First, my favorite amongst the 4 movies. And this is the prime example of how music affects Bionicle. My favorite theme, in fact, being Theme of Lacan. Strong and prevalent throughout the movie. Plus, Legends of Metro Nui has my favorite opening. I even use it in my intro. Plus, Legends of Metro Nui has a lot of variety. While Mask of Light is primarily serious, the inclusion of Matau brings a nice contrast to the flair of Bionicle we are so familiar with. I appreciate you, Matau. Without your role in these 2 movies, they would not be the same. Last comment by Juke. Love is canon, and that's a beautiful thing. Factual. Definitely not a nitpick, and not a hot take either. We've come to accept it. It's prevalent from the very first year. Whether you're referring to Huki and Maku, and Jala and Hali. Cannot count Rudaka and Sidorak, as that was purely business related, as the terminology is dictated. Even Matau has an interest in Nokama. As characters and personality, they are the perfect contrast. Many argue Vakama and Nokama are the better couple. But as depicted in the film, doesn't seem like Vakama feels that way toward her, even if her own belief is a reciprocation. But Vakama's primary goal was helping Toa Lacan, but not realizing the heart of Metro Nui are his fellow Matoran. The hunk Mr. Death. Bionicle should have made more smaller and connectable elements rather than big molds. That makes sense, especially regarding 2006 onward and the construction system. First 5 years had a focus of the small connectors being the only thing that connected body to armor. But LEGO got away from that, focused on less axles and connectors, giving the builds much less of a reliance on these small elements. Even to this day, construction figures connect by sockets, while Technic primarily uses the individual axles and pegs to complete their own builds. It's definitely part of the great divide within Bionicle, as LEGO's action figure build system did branch off away from Technic into its own thing. But like the actual LEGO system, all 3 overlap with interconnecting parts, as they are made to be compatible. Next hot take, by Milkman Whale. The franchise was never the same after Metro Nui. This builds off 2006 being my favorite year, as well as that for Juke. LEGO had truly left behind the tradition of the first 5 years, going into the Ignition era as it is nicknamed by the fans. New designs, new builds, far less focus on minimal connectors. But overall, 2006 started a whole new style of presentation. I admit, by 2005, I wanted a new setting and a new flair compared to Matanui and Metronui. And I'm sure the designers behind Bionicle felt no different. They needed a change, and they went all out in this new revolutionized style. This would be the identity Bionicle carried for the next few years, and I admire it. I love exploring the new territory, new focus of characters I love, Jala finally leading his own team as the Toa of Fire. This was the change fans and LEGO really needed. So thank you to both for the deep reciprocation. Next contribution is by Rich Sorgo. I really like the scrawl. From a design point, I absolutely agree. But can I classify this as a hot take? Stronius alone is a uniquely designed character. Between him and the scrawl, I love the combination of red and black, my most favorite dual-tone color variation. I've not heard a fellow fan go against the scrawl with any dislike, hatred, let alone scrutiny. So it's beyond me. But I'm proud to have the figures. They're well designed. I deeply appreciate everything that went into building these characters. No pun intended. From Reed Draws. Continuations are much more interesting fan content than reboots. There is truth in this. My best reference would be Scream, the fifth film that is, addressing that picking up or at least connecting your continuity to the predecessors is the norm right now, such as how Ghostbusters Afterlife is fully related to the original, not the 2016 version. Hard to say with Bionicle. We've only had one reboot, no form of continuation as of yet. And there I go, bringing up the rumors again. Could it be 2025? I hope and I pray. In actuality, I'm able to name off multiple reboots that surpass their original film. I'll give 3. Rise of the Planet of the Apes, The Hills Have Eyes, 2006, and The Immaculate Bumblebee. From Grammatical, Bionicle fell off in or around 2003. In regards to being an early adopter, I can't relate. When I think of something falling off, I think of going off the rails, abandoning what makes it great, and going in a blind direction that fans would not follow. But the majority of the fan base associates 2003 as a top contender for the best year. We had the very first movie based on a LEGO property, finally seeing the main villain in set form, and we moved in to fully articulate figures with the Rakshi. But by claiming it did fall off, are you saying you never picked it up again? You didn't invest in anything after 2003? Yes, Metro Nui is a huge shift 1 year later, as it is a prequel with a new style. This one is hard to pick apart. I definitely want more detail if I'm going to evaluate further. Intermittent franking. It was honestly downhill from the Hortica Vizirac era. Haraka were great, but after that, the sets and stories were kinda meh and honestly convoluted. I find some irony here. When comparing the first two eras, 2005 and before, and 2006 onward, I feel the story was very in-depth, leading up into, say, 2006. However, I also have the impression, once the Anika build was introduced, the figures took priority over the actual lore. And no, I'm not referring to the lack of quality of broken dual socket joints. Prominent and infamous. But as late as the Vizirac and Toho Hortica, these were clone sets, palette swaps, but having the amount of figures using the Anika build gives me a great respect for the toys. It is the primary aspect of the franchise. To summarize, Where the lore became convoluted, the figures took the stage as the primary focus. Now we have the perfect contrast of the next commenter. From LPG, 2007 was peak Bionicle. When regarding figure builds, everything from the Matoran to Karzani, it's absolutely satisfactory. I love the Anikas and the Byraki. So much variety individually between both teams. Madi Nui is a good setting. One prominent aspect in my mind is Stuart Sager's style being adapted into Madi Nui. Yes, he is much darker than the previous artist, but his skill really lent to this new environment. With the lack of light miles below the surface, it allowed his own style to shine and take advantage of this new subterranean world. Karapar was my first set from 07, followed by Hali, and then I found Matoro many years later at a resale shop for a great price. Today it would be considered a steal. Next from LPG, story was incredible with a very memorable sacrifice. In regards to the cast, looking at various creatures, looking at both teams, the large sets, and even the vehicles. Oh, and the miniatures. This was the final year we had the playsets. 2007 seems to be testing the water within every type of set Bionicle has ever had. See what I did there? Heck, I went many years not even knowing Maxilos is an actual machine, not biologically alive. Alternatively, I did not realize the Byraki are inspired by multiple marine life. I think my favorite addition has to be Lesovic, with a similar mass to what Liwa would carry a year later. But his design, his entire set, it's so unique and original, even for this incredible toy line. As a designer who adores graphics, seeing the characters brightly illuminated against a dark depth creates an incredible contrast. I never thought that would have worked, but they nailed it. It's minimal, but so effective. His third comment, while still following a Nika build, a lot more personality in each Toa build. Can't stress it enough. He's making the point I've already addressed. The variety between builds finally phased out clone sets, but once again, let's look at the larger sets. Maximus and Spinax, Lesovic, Gadunka, Karzani. The only thing these sets have in common is glowing parts. And a year later, we'd have the flight focus. But I digress back into the depths of Madi Nui. So much capability, so much oceanic inspiration spread across the line. Everything from vehicles to using tentacles and interacting with the creatures making up these depths. What better way to continue with what I just stated previously? Byraki were a strange but fun new enemy to face, and the Titan sets were fantastic. Thanks again, LPG, for the cognitive reciprocation. A prominent aspect that resurges from 2007 is the canister design. While the Anika have a vat-based packaging, the Byraki are more like a glacier. Surprising, but effective. Definitely the most ridiculous and obscure canister design we've had. They're quite easy to open, despite looking so complex. But the jagged, rippling effect and the depressed bubbles make it all the more memorable. It's a ridiculous design, and I can't help but look at the teeth and the eyes, which all the Byraki share, and they look menacing yet dead-eyed all at the same time. Like a cheap animation from the 90s where there is no variety in facial expressions. Perfect point here. Final comment to round off his hot takes. Squid launchers kinda meh though. Yeah, when it comes to projectiles, squid launchers are the absolute worst. For the life of me, I could not figure out how to use it when I first opened Karapar in 2007. Looking through the manual, it made no sense to me. But I think of treating it as a rubber band. It doesn't require a full retraction, nor should it be snug within the launcher. A subscriber did bring this to my attention. Originally, it was going to be of a different design, and the squids would not be of a soft rubber. So I don't know what form that would have taken to be hypothetical. But when you're a mediocre, non-functional action feature in a year of such great builds, you are overshadowed by the great superiority. New commenter: we need way more fan-made stuff based on the Ignition trilogy. The golden years were obviously iconic, but 2006 through 2008, by far the best story stuff in the series, and had lots of incredibly interesting concepts that have never been adapted. I'll be honest, I don't know the golden era of Bionicle. I could take a guess, but my favorites span the entire franchise. Not everything I like is within a single year. Yeah, 2006 through 2008 was the end of the second era before Glatorian would come into play. That was the original ending intended by the developers, from the point Christian Faber proposed the story of a biological chronicle. I didn't want to just have 2 years alone with Jala as a Toa and leading the team. I would love more opportunities where Takanuva and the Anika team up as it should be intended, especially dealing with the sacrifice Motoro had made. One Toa short, but in mourning nonetheless. Takanuva is the same generation. He shares their pain. Contributed by Rifter. Liwa's element being jungle instead of air in G2 is fine. At least he's still green. I see the point here, and to interpret, Liwa's element is that of organic plant life. Yeah, I believe that's accurate. Essentially, it does leave air out of the elemental abilities of V6 Toa, but in a new setting, it does make more sense. Regardless of his elemental basis, his design, perhaps the best yet. I've got no gripes here, no criticism, absolute satisfaction. Kit Ainsley brings up, I really dislike the Mystica, and I'm incredibly sad the Anika build became standard. The monotony is what caused me to stop buying sets, but I totally get people who love that post-Anika sets all look consistent and prefer them to older builds. Well balanced here, showing your own dislike while also acknowledging and not calling out those with an opposite opinion. I do prefer having a fully articulate figure over a gearbox for shifting 2 limbs. This allows for multiple poses, and to go really out of left field, great for stop motion. I myself have used stop motion, and I cannot stress enough how much better full articulation is, from the Anika builds to Construction. I'm not on board with using monotony to describe, because that refers to repetition, not enough variety, when in fact, the Anika builds have a variety of their own construct, while the clone sets or palette swaps are much more prevalent in 2001 through 2005. To break it down, I suppose there's more variety in the actual anatomy of the sets, as it was less focused on the gear function. So I think from there, we're meeting halfway. Now, I will continue with the taste of trash. I really don't like how the Nuva masks look, too melty looking and organic for my taste. I do get the impression they were going for a muscular membrane aesthetic. You're correct on the organic style. These were also the last masks before moving to the axle bit. One apparent factor is how the masks properly line up in proportion when applying the shoulder blades and chest armor. One thing I do recall, I believe these mask builds are unique to the Toa Nuva. Input from Costillas. There should have been a canon version of the Skakti fusions as an innate ability, like the Toa and Matoran Kata. The Paraka being like scumbag versions of the Toa, it would be neat. This would be like giving the Cycle Rangers their own mecha, or Zord as we say here in the US. Man, I'd love to see a mock-up using the Paraka's spine, being that's all rubber. That would take an extensive amount of building experimentation, but I do agree. In a way, there is a slight extremity of doing combiners with the Bionicle build, but fans across the net have already proven the capability, doing stuff even the original 5 years could not achieve. I had a friend once saying he disliked Bionicle in Technic because it's not nearly as thorough in comparison to the standard LEGO system. Once again, the mocks across all of social media prove that statement wrong. Coastal Crab Rahi. The 2001 through 2003 storyline in a vacuum wasn't interesting enough to hold a fandom for 20 years. Yes, building off the intent of LEGO to keep Bionicle going for 2 decades, the original era of Matanui is not ideal as a setting for this projection. I fantasize where Bionicle would be if it had ended in 2021, but this is not Law & Order SVU. Bionicle could not continuously do the same thing, keeping the interest up of the fan base, let alone grabbing new ones on board. I don't know, is there an online consensus that desire the toy line to have just stayed on Matanui, building off this era with the characters we were introduced to? Perhaps there is more to this hot take, but this is the first it has come to my attention. Next hot take is from Usolg. Orange was criminally underused, not Keat Orange, actual orange. Another opportunity to reference Power Rangers and Super Sentai. Orange is also majorly underused. Few of the seasons use it. We've only seen it used once in Power Rangers, specifically from SPD, but reports say the upcoming Cosmic Fury is utilizing it for the second time. Why is it underused, criminally as you describe? I feel the answer is probably relevant to both franchises, but I really don't know why. It's a secondary color, but so is purple and green, more common significantly. Even Technic builds, such as the F-150 Raptor, utilize orange, but it still seems a rarity. Is there a mold process in producing this color that makes it far more expensive than its comparatives? I do not know, but all the more reason to enjoy speculation. Losing gear functions and replacing them with projectiles was silly. On the opposite spectrum, we would have fans complaining gear functions made up every single year from 2001 through 2009, without variety. I'm at least thankful the projectiles all functioned differently, even if they have the same result. There's plenty of variety there. And as we've seen, once we abandoned the original era, that became a feature, an action feature for both hero and villain. It really doesn't bother me. At this point, I'm just surprised how great the Ninra Ghost Blaster is. Using it properly, it launches further than even the Zamor spheres. Last from Usolg, Botar was done dirty. When it comes to being anticlimactic, this is a primary example from the toy line. He's a well-designed character, he's misunderstood without even acknowledging his species, as the wiki lists as unknown. To be extremely optimistic, the rarity of seeing his build in person is a reverting testament to his role and contribution within the storyline. Because the Red Star Station is broken down, he could not be teleported back. Dang. I don't know why my mind is drifting to JRPGs, but I could just imagine a JRPG Bionicle would adapt into a video game, and then you use the mechanic of summoning to bring Botar. Man, that would work so well. Dang, I love this idea. When I acquire every required set from Brutaka to Axon to Vizon, I want to put this into play, making a turn-based RPG style video. From Penta Deuce, the Bionicle PS2 games are really good. Referencing both games on Xbox, GameCube, and even the Wii, but in regard, every Bionicle video game for console and PC release is a different genre. Bionicle the game, for example, is action-adventure. Bionicle Heroes is a third-person shooter. Even the 3 for Game Boy Advance are different genres as well. Isometric, turn-based RPG, and my favorite, Matoran Adventures, is a side-scroller. Looking into the past, they all play really well, and their style is adapted well from the LEGO's build. But one thing both games do right is prioritize the gameplay and mechanics, which is what a video game needs to do. Diego chimes in with, fist pieces look way better than the other Technic pieces that replaces the Mata hands, but Mata hands are better than both of these. This is a debate of function versus style. I admit, many years before LEGO came up with the idea, I thought of a fist build with the axle port in the center, and I'm grateful they had the idea later down the line. If you look at characters like Maximus and even Hydraxin, they have individual digits, which gives it a great style, but also the claws look great. But I understand the limitation of the fist piece. It does not have the perpendicular axle ports, so it does lose functionality, but that never really bothered me. It's required by builds such as Matau's arrow slicers, which only attach in one fashion. I could entirely leave this up to preference of the fan. Gitas comes in hot. I think Huki's Mari form is underrated, but could have been improved. I'm in total agreement here. I love his design, just how unique it is. I always get the sense of a hammerhead shark, if that's what the designers were going for. But the Mari remain my favorites. I'd rather the set be a severe statement of build than something we expect or in line with his contemporary Toa. One fact that just came to my mind, Huki's original ability as a Matoran to break stone with his head as well as his feet. Much like soccer, comparing that he is an undisputed co-league champion. Perhaps having this hammerhead lends to his ability. Continuing on, we have Bogdan. The 2003 Matoran were okay, but their proportions are kinda weird. The added articulation was appreciated though, even though I prefer the 2001 Matoran because of how they look. This might even be a response to updating the design to accommodate for the Coley sticks and the puck, so in that regard it does make sense. Though, it doesn't seem that Miramax followed this build when adapting the film, as the Matoran practically look nothing like the figures released within the same year. Essentially, it's a miniature build like that of the Rakshi. Then again, Makuta has a very similar waist articulation, spinning at the torso. Yeah, so we have 3 sets sharing the same motif from 2003 alone. That was not clear before now. The Collector of Different Toy. CCBS is better than the new SCCBS. This is a unanimous opinion. But the creature and character building system was a nice step up and even an evolution of Bionicle, moving away from Technic and becoming its own separate system.
Yeah.
as Tahu
swords,
uses this
one black
new
body
SCCBS,
piece, and two
or the
big
system
silver
character and
swords
creature
that
builder
are gonna
system.
turn into
It had no reliance on
two
Technic
bags,
parts to
and
the
one
extent of my
instruction
knowledge.
Let's get building.
Still, I ponder what traditional LEGO fans think of Technic and Bionicle. Do they exist as a conglomerate trio? Really have no idea. The one guarantee each of us share.
On step 14,
LEGO makes quality toys
sure that you fit these gear
at the extremity of the Danish company we dearly associate with.
Both of the gear pieces.
Bot's obsession. The Toamata sets were mid. The Toametru sets were hot. Accommodating use of the emoji. In many regards, I do prefer the Metru over the Toamata, as the Toanuva are an updated revamp. The Metru all share the same build. Besides the mask, tools, and color, the Metru are all identical build, but they are the first Toa with full body articulation. Now we can finally look back on 2004, knowing this was a hint of the future, a taste of what is yet to come. And here I am in absolute satisfaction. The following years would take inspiration, but claim and form their own Kanohi of an identity. Input from Berry Brain. I kinda wish the story wasn't so not complex, but as someone who followed along via the comics, things post Metru Nui could get pretty out there, confusing. I relate heavily. In retrospect, I prefer the complexity of lore. I'd rather have an expansive story with a multi-cast of characters, shifting its focus between hero and villain, which is a very prevalent theme in Bionicle. Asheline. The dark colors of 2004 onward are a huge downgrade from the bright colors of the preceding sets. Nah, I appreciate the contrast. Even Super Sentai, when designing the suits, few seasons share the exact same color shade, regardless of which suit is donned. On that matter, the colors of 2004 are not carried through every single year. Look at the shade of Tahu in his mystical form. It's an entirely different shade between that of the bright original and that of Toa Vakama. So yeah, I'm entirely opposed to this opinion because I love a vast array of colors. Lemony Lepid. They should have made Bionicle City of Legends. 2004 needed a video game to flesh out the city properly. No argument here. 2004, Metru Nui has such an incredible environment. I could see the protodermis shoots being used for fast travel, visiting every Koro, all with a different purpose. You learn new skills from experience in Ga Metru, craft items, craft tools in Po Metru, and craft new Kanohi with new abilities in Ta Metru. So much potential, so much that would work in a video game construct. Metru Nui remains my most favorite setting within Bionicle. Just the aesthetic, the amount that was put into it to create a whole new world. Before or since, Bionicle has not explored any environment like that. Just imagine DLC, taking place during 2005, exploring the city affected by the Visorak. Here now is another opposed spectrum. Cameron Mills. I really like the look of the Toanuva's mask, especially Tahu's Haonuva. Each mask seems to have their own inspiration. The melty look, as described earlier in the video, describes Tahu's mask, almost like his elemental power is melting his own Kanohi, but it also resembles a muscular structure. I do prefer them over their original forms before being energized by the protodermis. They're so diverse, they're so detailed, it's hard to see where the inspiration came from, but that all adds to the mystery to be revealed. dreadful windfall. Rather than those direct-to-DVD movies, there should have been a TV show. Yeah, that might have worked if LEGO didn't have their priorities in another TV show. That one, from the network that Disney purchased. Yeah. Bionicle is adaptable to practically any medium. This is one of the few it did not explore. It could have worked, even if it was a two-dimensional animation, such as the original era web animation. But, yes, LEGO should have put the budget into a Bionicle television adaptation instead of that other series. To the extent of my knowledge, I'm not even sure that lasted a whole year. But I'm convinced it has no fan base. It's the darkest age LEGO has powered through. If it weren't for Bionicle, the consensus would be that it would have killed LEGO. Yes, if I could change the past, I would make sure that never happened and put all that budget into Bionicle. It's incredible that a 1-year difference could spell doom or triumph. Thankfully, it is the latter. From Bussy Fajitas, if Stars wasn't the final sets in Bionicle, they would have been well received as a cool throwback to yesteryear. I really have no issue with these sets. It is anticlimactic. They were also priced at only $7.99, which the original Toa shared in 2001. Throwback is accurate. To think about it, these are also the final release before the Constructor system was introduced with Hero Factory. In a way, it's like the transition between the two systems. At this point, I hope 2026, at minimum, LEGO does an anniversary release for the quarter-centennial of the toy line that saved them from bankruptcy. Hermes retrogresses into 2005. 2005 had the ugliest sets and was hardly carried by the characters. Truly lends itself to the seasonal rot trope associated with Bionicle in 2005. What you describe as ugly design is not limited to the characters. The labels of both the canisters and box sets, very unappealing. The green symbolizes corruption, poison, essentially what happens to Vakama. To balance that out, in finding the balance, that is what the design was going for. To this day, I feel like 2005 is the lowest point of Bionicle before everything resurged with the Ignition storyline of 2006. Last from Hermes. The unnecessary gendering of elements was dumb. This concept is new to me. Only when making this video did I discover multiple fans bringing it up. Not every Bionicle character has a gender. Each toe of water is female. And it is designated. But in that regard, a Toa is restricted to their own element. They have the ability to command the powers of multiple Kanohi, but I see both sides of the argument. In the hero side, the colors are associated with their respective elements without any alteration. Ari Nut. The later lines could have used more Rahi. I'm curious if LEGO decided and instead focus on the Rahi combiners of every hero and villain. Maybe they even wanted to diversify combiner models from the original era. Perhaps they wanted to differentiate from the Kata combiners, rather than continuing with the same idea. 2004 even have Rahi combiners for the Matoran releases, which I always appreciated. Mother Unlimited. Maybe more than lukewarm, but the franchise needs a revival. Not just because it was good or because of nostalgia, but because, as indicated by the general success of Ninjago and Monkey Kid, LEGO should invest in their original IPs more, over recreating other franchises. To this day, I feel LEGO throws everything at the wall, seeing what works and building off their strengths. And we now know LEGO could revive Bionicle and not take a major loss, even if it did not sell. I recall reading a consensus a while ago. There's an average of 20 years before fans start to feel nostalgic for their childhood times. As LEGO is the top toy company and the top manufacturer, they are the most capable of reviving one of their own IPs, more so than any of their contemporaries or competitors. Input of some guy. Bionicle should not return. Given how watered down G2 was, I can only see them making a bland story for babies if they tried again. And look at how ambitious Bionicle is when releasing in 2001. This is prevalent across the mediums, everything from toys to movies. It's appealing to kids of a new demographic and new generation. That is the primary audience for any toy. So it makes sense to adapt in a modern setting and appealing to a new generation. It has been proven. If you appeal only to an older generation, usually your IP will be appreciated only by those of the original era. If you can't bring a new audience on board, there is a minimal chance the IP will thrive in this new rendition. And these are the facts, as proven by the statistics. Flaring in with the next hot take, Arson Urbanism, Voyatorin, Bestorin. I have always had favor for these 6. I have a build unique to what came after and even before, and the only additional sets to use the Toa Metro masks. A good amount of variety here, as I appreciated the build wasn't all solidified with its connecting components. Even the box template used for each of their builds. It was new for Bionicle and an excellent way to ease into this new year, the Ignition era. Plus, compared to the Paraka and Anika, when you look at all 3 sets, you wouldn't guess they're each from the same year. Chaos Bringer K-Bay. G2 was mishandled by everyone. By everyone, does he include LEGO themselves? I get the impression G2 had the correct ingredients, but not the reciprocation between fanbase, child LEGO fans, and LEGO as well. It seemed more like an experimentation to see if Bionicle could thrive and adapt to a new audience in an entirely new decade. I have no idea. But as a designer who adores graphics, the builds, the design, absolutely ingenious. To the point it really separates itself independently from G1. You can guess these are Bionicle figures, and that this is a new era of Constructor, rebooting for what Technic started. This may be the most accurate hot take within these selections. You went with a simple 5-word sentence, but a statement true to everyone. To round off the conclusion of this video, I will end with 3 hot takes of my own. Paraka are inferior to the concept designs. As one who loves the Paraka for both design and character, when I saw these concepts, can't shake the feeling of what could have been. These truly do look more like Toa. As the villainous anti-variants, I would love to see these in figure form. We only have 5 of the 6, and it's unclear who designed these. My first guess was Stuart Sager, but in the extremity of Bionicle concept art, these are amongst my favorites across both generations. Penultimate hot take. There should have been more than 7 elements amongst the Toa. We have multiple abilities spread across the villains, from the Krana to the Rock Sheet. Primarily, the Toa only had amongst these 7. Takanuva did gain shadow abilities in 2008, and the Toa Nika have lightning as a dual ability. And I'm not referring to the multiple Kanohi powers across the line, more of a new elemental style centered around their primary skill set. I would have loved to have seen a Toa of Gravity, Sonic, maybe even a Toa of Shadow. We have made it to the finale. Thank you for sticking around. For more on Bionicle, I have an extensive amount of videos from the past 3 years. Rated Exploited uploads every Saturday night. Be ready, be anticipating the newest of Bionicle. Mari are the best Toa builds. I am disregarding the fragility. I'm looking past the limited repetition. I'm looking past any bias, any preference, any interpretation. But that is the purpose of an opinionated hot take. The Mari remain my most favorite builds amongst every Toa team. The Metru heads were brought back for these designs. The contrasting color to each of the Toa's main elements is an exceptional design. These are the first Toa to abandon palette swap builds. You'd second guess yourself if they're even from the same team. I cannot change my preference. I can't get the axle out of my head. These Toa designs are the finest. But a bonus hot take, I find these to be more appealing than the G2 Uniters. Yes, I am going there. I agree with this being peak Bionicle. 2007 has playsets, Toa, miniatures, large sets, and a new team of villains. This has been a flaming hot endeavor of Rated Exploited. Thanks all for the views. Thank you for 500 subscribers. I am Rokulai, signing off. Forever your fellow gamer.